it really is about population control, depopulation, and creating the world they and the future they want for them, for the rich and powerful.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Before we begin this interview with my good friend Dr. B and Sharp Edge, and this is part 2 of our conversation, I just want to let you know that there is a better way to surf the internet, a safer way, a private way. By using the Brave browser, you guys can download this for Mac OS or Windows, and the Brave browser is incredible because not only won't it spy on you like Google's Chrome does, it's more than 2 times faster than any other browser you'll use. Plus, it has a built-in ad blocker, which blocks trackers. You can also earn rewards by opting into their privacy-respecting ads if you want to, and then you'll be rewarded with BAT tokens that you can pay forward to publishers and creators that you love. So, take back control with Brave. You'll block the data-grabbing ads used by Chrome and others. You'll also block harmful ads and trackers, which will mean a faster internet experience for you. I'll leave the link to the Brave browser below. Download it, install it, and use it. You'll be glad you did. All right, let's get started. Thank you so much for tuning in, and welcome back. For those of you who missed part 1, I will link it below this video. This is part 2 of my conversation with our good friend Dr. B and our friend The Sharp Edge, who have collaborated and really done some remarkable work, which has been shared at corysdigs.com and, of course, at sgtreport.com. So without me babbling too much further, let me welcome back the one and only Dr. B. Thanks for joining us. Hi. And my new friend, The Sharp Edge. How are you, Edge?
Hey there, doing well, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming back on, and we have a tight 40 to 45 minutes here, so let's begin. You have the floor.
Okay, so, I met Dr. B. You know how I met Dr. B? She shared her personal story with me that she had posted, or that you had posted on your YouTube channel, and I was so moved by that. We started talking that way, and she started sharing so much of her research and personal stories. And I don't know, Dr. B hasn't had much time to get into some of her personal stories, but they're fascinating. The inside scoop that she has on medical research, on the people that she works with, closely with, it's just fascinating. And so we started digging, and the web just got so massive. And I really wanted to put this out there so people could see a broad scope of how infiltrated the syndicate is in the medical industry, and how they are driving the research and suppressing things as well. And so tried to compile all of the research. And honestly, I wasn't even able to include all of it in the 5-part series. There's so many connections. It would have been a book if we had compiled it all. But we did try to get cram pack as much information as we possibly could into this series and break it down into 5 parts so it's easy to digest, and you can see the overall agendas. But when you walk through all 5 parts, you really see a lot of the same players throughout the story, driving the funding, driving the research, pushing the research in one direction or another and suppressing it in other areas. Like, for example, with the pharmaceutical industry, so it was really Rockefeller who started Big Pharma. It didn't exist in the early part of the 20th century. And with the Rockefeller Foundation and the Flexner Report, that's how it all began. The Flexner Report was a report that was put out, and that is what kind of standardized medical institutes. And with that, a lot of medical schools and hospitals closed down, and the other ones kind of consolidated. And so the remaining ones that were consolidated were driven by grants by the Rockefeller Foundation to do research in certain areas that would be for pharmaceuticals, that would be patented and sold through any of the Rockefeller Foundation subsidiaries. And so you can see how they monopolized and steered the research for their financial gain. And that is really kind of the origins of big pharma and the multi-billion-dollar industry that we see today. And then you see how the same players are doing the same sort of thing in cancer research. They really got ahead of it in the early part of the 20th century. The predecessor of the American Cancer Society was like in the early 1900s, and they lined the board with their guys. Some of these characters that Dr. B was referring to in part one of our conversation, were part of the American Cancer Society. That whole story with Dr. Mary Sherman and Dr. Oxner, Dr. Mary's monkey. Dr. Oxner was, the head of the American Cancer Society. These are not rogue doctors that are doing this research. These are people that are put into high levels of positions to drive and steer the research at high levels. And so, really they monopolized cancer research and steered it in the direction that was fitting their model, which is the pharmaceutical model, the surgery model, the chemotherapy model. Anything outside of that, is suppressed, like we saw with the story of Dr. Royal Rife, which I do mention in part 2 of the series, which focuses on cancer research. But so you see how they take over, they monopolize, they steer the research in the direction that they want it to go. So what's their agenda? Well, it's to make money, but it's also eugenics. It's also population control, which we've also talked about in part 1 of our conversation. And so a lot of the research has that underlying theme, that underlying agenda. And I really dig deep into that in part 3 of the report, which is entirely about eugenics from the beginning, with Darwin and his cousin, Sir Francis Galton, and go all the way through the 20th century to present day, and the work that they're doing in genetics. It's all part of this massive eugenics agenda of depopulation, elimination of the unfit, and the procreation of whoever they deem as fit. And so,
can I ask you something?
Yes.
You mentioned Darwin, and QO says follow the bloodlines. I've talked in great detail about Darwin and the war against humanity. One of the most watched interviews, in fact, the most watched interview I've ever done, was one with James Perloff, titled "The Elite Don't Want You to Know God is Real." Do you want to talk a little bit about Darwin and evolution, just briefly? Why did you mention Darwin?
I wanted to go back to the origins of eugenics, and it started with Darwin and his theory of natural selection. It's unnatural to me, but yeah. So when he came up with this concept, of course, people wanted to apply it to humans, and when his cousin Sir Francis Galton took that on, he's the one who coined the term eugenics. And the concept of eliminating the undesirables in the human gene pool and promoting the desirables. Well, who's deciding who's desirable or not? It's certainly not you or me. And so that's the problem, is that the ones with the power, money, and influence are the ones who are deciding who's desirable and not.
Yeah, we see the same thing on YouTube today. The ADL gets to decide who is authoritative when it comes to news and who is not, who gets silenced and who gets promoted. I digress, but
exactly.
Yeah.
Can I say one thing, Edge, about just relating to Darwin, and you had said earlier, Sean, the bloodlines. Just wanted to point out that Darwin's bulldog, the person that notoriously within the Royal Academy of Sciences that really pushed him and really was his big defender, was a guy named Thomas Huxley. And Huxley, he's either the grandfather or the father of Aldous and Julian Huxley. And when Edge, I think you might get into a little bit of the Tavistock Institute with Aldous Huxley and Brave New World, and Aldous Huxley being involved with the Fabian Society, which that was where George Orwell had learned some of the plans and then wrote 1984. But I think you also talked about the connection of Aldous Huxley's relation to the Tavistock Institute.
Yeah, the Tavistock Institute's huge. It's a big theme in part 5 of the series, which is all about psychology and mind control. And, yeah, it's played a key role in shaping the minds of people globally, but particularly in America and in the UK, and shaping our thoughts, our tastes, what's trending. They really have manufactured consent and manufactured the thoughts and desires through their manipulation of the minds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So is Club of Rome, by the way, as it pertains to climate change.
Wow. Yes. Yeah, and so everything that that you think is your freedom of choice. No, it's manufactured, and it has been that way for a long time. It's just that they sell it and package it as freedom of choice and family planning, and it's all manufactured. And the more that we can wake people up to this, the more that we can start to create a new paradigm in every way, in every sense. It's not just in the medical industry, although this report focuses on the medical field, but it's in every aspect of our lives, education, politics, everything. We have to really shift the paradigm and pave a new way that does not necessarily go with their agenda for us. Because as you had mentioned previously throughout our part 1 of this conversation, it really is about population control, depopulation, and creating the world and the future they want for them, for the rich and powerful.
Given all your research, and Dr. B, feel free to jump in, what do they want? Because part 5, yeah, but part 5 is about transhumanism, and to me that's very satanic. It's very anti-human at its core. 666, Mark of the Beast, take the chip. Dr. B, go ahead.
Well, here's what they want. I actually pulled up Aldous Huxley's quote that he gave in a speech to Tavistock Group, and it summarizes the agenda, and much of it, the agenda is about control and manipulating minds. But here's his quote from 1961 given to Tavistock Group. He says, "There will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it, because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods." And this seems to be the final revolution.
Yeah, I've heard that clip. I think I've played it in videos. People can be made to love their servitude.
That we are in process of developing a whole series of techniques which will enable the controlling oligarchy, who have always existed and presumably always will exist, to get people actually to love their servitude. This seems to me the ultimate in malevolent revolution, shall we say.
So creepy, but it really does ring true, and you see it. You see it being played out now, and in the transhumanism part 5, it really is their end game. They do want to eliminate the unfit, but now we're to the point where they're looking at upgrading the ones who are deemed as fit, and they're doing it to a point where they're just really playing God. And you have to, when you look at it as a whole, it takes your breath away. The kind of stuff that they're playing with, because it could have catastrophic effects on the entire human population. The kind of things that they're doing with AI and with genetic editing,
nanotech.
Yep. and it is their end game. They want to live forever, and they want to expedite human evolution for a select few. But
That's a loaded phrase, though. That's a super loaded phrase. Let's talk about that. Expedite human evolution. First, we have to buy into the theory of evolution. Second, we have to believe that we evolved from microbes, right? We turned into monkeys. Some of the microbes turned into elephants. Some of them turned, I mean, come on, give me a break. We have to believe that God is not real. So let's talk about their form of evolution, which is merging men and women with machines, merging human beings with machines. I can't think of anything more satanic.
Right, right. And you think of this stuff as the stuff of science fiction or way off in the future. No, we're here. We're here. And, when you have a director of engineering at Google, who is a leader in the transhumanist movement, saying by 2029 that that artificial intelligence will have reached and start to surpass that of human intelligence, and that we will then need to merge with AI in order to not be superseded by it, then you really see how it is not something that future generations have to face. This is something that we will have to face. And the stuff that they're doing with biotechnology and bioengineering is advancing rapidly, and so much so that governments worldwide are having difficulty regulating. It's becoming so diversified. It really is hard to regulate and to enforce. I mean, when you have a Chinese doctor, He Jiankui, announcing, in 2017, that he had genetically edited the genomes of 2 baby girls brought to full term. That is the beginning of a new era where they are doing inheritable genetic editing, which there was supposed to be a moratorium on that. But I fear and I believe that this is not being, this moratorium isn't being followed by some countries, laboratories, etc. It's dangerous what they're playing with.
They're playing God. I mean, it reminds me of the Tower of Babel. I mean, the hubris of these people. But who could expect anything else from people that are really ungodly people? If they don't believe in a higher power, a creator, if they don't believe that this is all, that we are all a spark of divinity, if we were created by the divine, by a God, a loving God, if they don't believe in that, or heaven forbid, they believe in the opposite of that and they worship something far darker, then of course they're filled with hubris. Of course they would mess with God's creation. Of course they'd want to defile God's creation.
Of course.
I want to point out to folks who don't know Dr. B, you've got to go listen to the interview that I did with, the first interview I've ever did with Dr. B. So powerful. And she talks about the testimony, her personal testimony about being a pathologist and having to deal with aborted baby parts. It broke her. I mean, it woke her up, and it really brought her to her knees. Dr. B, do you remember what that one was titled? What did I call that interview?
Truth. It was just one word, truth, I think. I think it was back earlier. You know what? It was at the beginning of this year. And this is the beginning of the next year. How cool. We're right at the beginning for both years.
I would bet you guys, if you use the YouTube search engine or Google, it'll be very difficult to find that interview with a simple search, because they continue to change their algorithms to literally filter out truth. Ironic, I titled it that. Mm-hmm. I will try to find it and link it below.
I think if you do Dr. B, like SGT report, and then truth, I think that it comes up, but you have to enter in a lot of words for it. But
it's so powerful. It's such a powerful interview, and you're so brave to do it, because, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your personal testimony, but these people are hell-bent on defiling humanity. When we hear the phrase family planning, and when we think of these, Planned Parenthood, I mean, they've taken the language and they spin it to their favor. In their view, family planning is, if you get pregnant, have an abortion.
Right. And what we've seen is that the eugenicists and the early part of the 20th century, that agenda never changed. It was only after the horrors of World War II and the revelations of what the Nazis were doing with the Holocaust that they changed the wording from eugenics to genetics, and the wording became less about abortion and more about family planning. It was just a word game, but their agenda never changed.
It's always a Trojan horse word game. It's
Yeah.
promised up front for something good with sinister motives that are really, really hard for most people to believe until your eyes get opened and you realize that we are dealing with a satanic system, which I didn't even believe in. Like you said, getting back to my testimony, it floored me when I realized the extent of evil that was possible. I wasn't gonna tell this story, but now that you brought up God into it, and it just reminds me of what Edge and I were trying to do and how great of a job she did with putting this out. I will tell this story of when Edge. Do you remember when you sent me the rough draft on this part 5, the one that covers all the transhumanism, and it talks a lot about George Church and Jeffrey Epstein bringing him down to his island. I mean,
oh yeah, I remember
George Church. I mean, he just a 60 minutes interview was released on him, I think like the next day or the day before, on how he wanted to do his dating app based on your genetic profile. And I was reading that article on my way to work and just pondering it, and something all of a sudden stopped me, and I thought about getting back to my original testimony about how the first time I really started seeing God move in my life was when I decided I was learning about MK Ultra and I wanted to reach out and help the MK Ultra victims and understand what was going on and what it must be like for people born into this. And I had a couple of friends that I was talking to daily and really trying to help them. And it's when I first found God in my life, and I would pray and these miracles would start happening. It was just serendipity was just overwhelming of going. It was mind-boggling. It was wonderful and awe-inspiring. But something made me stop reading your article right there at George Church, and I hadn't prayed in a while, and I looked up and I prayed to God. I said, God, if we're on the right track here, will you show me? Will you let me know we're doing the right thing, that you want us to expose this? And then 5 minutes later, I get out and I start walking on my way to work, and George Church, I look up and it's George Church right in front of me. He walked right by me, and it was, you can't miss him. He's like 6'6". He's got this big, tall, lanky white beard. It was him. And I'm like, okay, that's some serendipity. So
that's a God thing.
It is.
Yeah.
I guess we should probably round out the conversation here. We have about 7 or 8 minutes left. Edge, do you want to round out the conversation with anything regarding your 5-part series here? I know we've sort of been all over the map, but the transhumanism, part 5 in your series, is really an important one to me. Again, we've been talking about it here because their vision for humanity is, in my view, quite literally anti-human. That's what transhumanism is. It's an anti-human agenda.
It is. And to me, it was the most important part of the 5-part series. If your listeners and my readers don't have a chance to read all 5 parts, I understand. But if you only have a chance to read one, read that one. Because we're in it. It's not something off in the distant future. We're in it now. And there's going to be some tough choices that we each of us have to make. And some real soul searching as far as what does it mean to be human? And what does it mean to mess with with the way God created us? So definitely check that part out. But I was floored by the advances that were being made and the research that they're doing and how far along they are on all of it. Because this is their end game. I didn't realize how far along we were.
Yeah. Transhumanism, a noun, the belief or theory that the human race can evolve beyond its current physical and mental limitations, especially by means of science and technology. Just imagine that. Imagine the hubris of these people thinking that they can play God with God's creation, human beings.
Mm-hmm.
It's so sick. It's so sick.
It is. It is. It's disheartening, but this is why it's so important to wake people up now, because step by step we're getting closer and closer, and people could unwittingly make some really bad personal medical choices if they're not aware of what their agenda is.
Here's another one. Transhumanism is an international philosophical movement that advocates for the transformation of the human condition by developing and making widely available sophisticated technologies to greatly enhance human intellect and physiology. Well, they've been telegraphing this in their movies, Hollywood movies, forever. Dr. B, how should we round out this conversation in your view? And I want to thank you for your voice again. That interview we did titled Truth is a must hear.
Well, thanks, Sean. I would say don't accept any implants or chips within your forehead or your right hand. It's probably
Amen.
for health purposes. If that's what they say, if they say you can't buy or sell or eat without it, what is it? Buy or sell? Think twice and really. It's a lot to take in, especially if you're hearing this stuff for the first time, but we need to learn it. We need to catch up and we need to act fast. It's got me at a loss for words. How about that? I don't know, Edge, how would you round it out?
I would say just educate yourself and your family about your medical choices, and make sure that you are aware of the agendas behind them. And if you are in the medical field, thank you for being in the medical field. We appreciate you. This is in no way meant to malign all the wonderful people who work day in and day out to try to save lives. Thank you. But the more of you that can wake up to the agenda that's driving a lot of the medical research, we need you. We need you in that position, like Dr. B, to be able to create a new paradigm where medical research and medical care is meant to save and heal humanity, not work against us and for them.
Well, that's very well said. And what it makes me realize is that if people listen to part one of this interview, and then of course this part two, especially if you're in the medical industry and you understand the history and the connections of the deep state criminal cabal to the medical field, the modern day Rockefeller world of medicine, once you understand the history and the connections, your perspective will change. And that's all we're asking people to do, is view this thing from 30,000 feet, and your entire perspective will change, and maybe your heart will open, as Dr. B's did when she had to deal with those aborted babies. Dr. B, thank you so much for your time and your voice.
It's my pleasure, Sean.
All right. And the Sharp Edge, thank you so much. I really appreciate meeting you and your voice. And why don't you shout out your YouTube channel and how people can follow you?
Thank you so much for having me on, Sean. I really love your show, and it's just a pleasure to be here. You guys can find me on HiveMind. That's H1VEM1ND.com. I'm also, my writing is on Corey'sDigs.com, and you can find me and interact with me on Twitter at the Sharp Edge 1.
Right.
And YouTube channel, HiveMind.
Yeah. Hive with the eyes as ones. Absolutely. I'll try to link all this below, guys. I hope I don't forget. I'll try. My thanks to both of you for coming on, Dr. B and Sharp Edge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
All right. God bless you guys. And one last word. Again, guys, take the 30,000 foot view, change your perspective, understand that the war on humanity is real. The agendas are anti-human. And just keep in mind when we talk about language, as we did in part two here, the Department of Defense used to be called the Department of War, and the Pentagon is getting another $700+ billion here in the new year. Change your perspective, open your heart, and know God is real. You're special, and you were created in His image For real news 24/7, you guys can visit us directly at sgtreport.com. God bless.
They're evoking the mathematics of Jesus Christ to perform these mass rituals. These are not just rituals to bring down a few buildings in New York City to, start a war in Iraq. These are not just rituals to try to get your guns or whittle away your freedoms. This is not all it is. At the core, these are black magic rituals.